Hello there, it's Christopher John Joseph in Melbourne, Australia. I've had a career in gardening and horticulture. I've spent 7 years fighting in Melbourne to receive antifungal treatment because I have a systemic fungal yeast infection that's poisoning the body to death. My GP, a brilliant GP of 40 years, family GP, has tried all the oral antifungals to help me, but they didn't work. We tried for 7 years to get a specialist in Melbourne, that's 20 specialists, to give me intravenous. They've refused. My GP is not allowed to give me intravenous, so I've been left to die in agony by the medical profession in Melbourne, Australia. I've had a long interest in oils, essential oils and such things, natural medicines, so once the pathology labs in Melbourne, the main private ones, were really very bad at their work regarding yeast and fungal identification. And in fact, it took me a few years to find out that they refused to report yeast in my lung and in the skin. We've had biopsies done, it's systemic, it's in the urine, it's in the skin, it's in the lungs. I've got about 10,000 microscopy images now, so I was trained to use a microscope 40 years ago for my gardening and horticultural work at a horticultural college. That evidence I'll show you later, but right now this is what's been saving my life, preventing my body from dying for the last 10 months. Every single day I get into a freezer, minus 19 degrees, and for the first 6 months of this treatment, I had to use my friend's fruit shop. Wonderful people, my local fruiterers who I've known all my life, the family, they cared more about me than 20 specialists, or really 19 specialists. There is one specialist who I'll honour, Piers Canty at the Epworth Hospital. He's the only one who treated me with complete respect, immediately got me in for a bronchoscopy, but the result from one of the private labs here called Melbourne Pathology said there was no mycology in my lungs, so his hands were tied, and it was only later on I realised how bad these pathology labs are, and then their refusal to report yeast. So that freezer in the background, you can see through the door there. I'll be showing you in a moment. I will get in that freezer. I'll show you the process. The deep breathing helps break up the deadly biofilm and the fungal bodies in my lungs. It's also in the skin and elsewhere, but the lung is where it's predominantly growing. And I'll show you now how this has kept me alive. This is a lifesaver. This treatment can save lives around the world. I've been treated like a piece of dirt here in Melbourne by the medical profession. I'm ashamed to say of Australian medical profession, there are very serious problems. 2 GPs who were helping me were both threatened because I was gaining more and more evidence of the incompetency and negligence of the specialists, and particularly the private pathology labs. I'll show you that later, but I'll show you now straight away what I've been doing to keep my body alive every day. I nearly die every day, and the symptoms are now like meningitis. I'll just switch over here just so you can understand this is a legitimate case. First of all, I'll just quickly scroll through that. That is just a general dialogue of what's been happening and the cryotherapy treatment and the antifungals that were oral given to me by my GP failed. So I'll just quickly move through that, and you can of course pause the video to read it all, but it's just a general description also of the cryotherapy treatment that I'm using, and there's also a list of what I've been using ever since the medical profession left me to die. These are all the natural antifungals which I've had to research, and I've also done lots of culture of the various things I've coughed up. You know, I've had two culturing systems going at different temperatures to culture in agar plates, etc., because I know how to do those things. So they're the natural medications. I'll just leave them there for you to look at. These are also attacking the infection, the fungal infection, yeast infection. And there's the freezer cryotherapy treatment general protocol. And I'm happy to, if you send me an email, I can send all this to you on an email, and I'm certainly happy to even post USBs with all the images. I have about 10,000 images, but I'll be showing you some of the main ones later on. But the main thing is to see this is the treatment I've used for 10 months, and I'll be getting in that freezer again today. I've built it up to 3 hours a day now. I had to, because it wasn't working at lower amounts of cryotherapy treatment. I have a little fan here, you can see outside, coming outside the bottom of the freezer. That has a small fan and some tissue paper and a block of wood in it. I put essential oils in that, and the piping runs over the top of the freezer, through the wall, and then it comes out here in this room here where I am now speaking to you, And on the other side behind me is another desk with a computer on where I do a lot of research regarding this and other matters and horticultural things that I'm interested in. And when I'm on that computer, I wear a mask which I've adapted. It's a dust mask which I'll show you, and that pipes very cold air from the freezer into my breathing. It's not as cold as being in the freezer. That's the best place to be, to break up the biofilm. That the very, very cold air, we know yeast is involved. Yeast breaks apart in the refrigeration. In just when I was doing all these research for 5 years myself, microscopy work, I noticed when I put the sputum sample in the fridge to look at it in a couple of days' time, the cellular structures had already broken down. Of course, I realised eventually, oh, it's yeast. Of course, a yeast doesn't like the cold, it falls apart. So that's why this is saving my life. We know a yeast is involved. So that's the basic instructions there on the cryotherapy treatment itself, and that's there for anyone who wishes to view it. These are some of the things, examples of what I'm coughing up, and I'll just also, so you know, this is a legitimate case. I'll just show you here, there's about 16 reports over 7 years of fungi. I won't read that, but that's again a general summary. You can just view that yourself. My entire life savings have gone, $200,000. The medical profession sent me broke while I was trying to fight for help. So I've had to help myself. I've had a professor from a university come here. I've liaised with 4 different universities once I realised how bad these professional medical people are here in Melbourne regarding fungi and yeast, and they were a massive help to me, massive support. And a professor actually came to my home because I was accused by the specialists of contaminating my slides. So he witnessed me preparing it. He actually teaches that, and he gave me this letter saying absolutely there's no problem, his slides are not contaminated. A wonderful GP, one of the GPs who was threatened, also came to my home, and he also supplied me with a note saying I've watched him prepare these slides. Even though he's not a microbiologist, he can see elements there that appear fungal, and everything is as good as anyone could do in a lab. So this is a letter from my GP of 40 years that I had to give to specialists. I had to keep getting more and more and more information, more references, and they threw all these things in the rubbish bin, all of them. That includes all these reports. So eventually we started getting reports of different fungi in the sputum and others from the urine, etc., and blood from a private company. So there's a number of fungi that could be here, and these are the reports just to show you that this is a very serious, legitimate case. This is a wonderful person who helped me from the university. He actually contacted, he said, there's only one person in Melbourne I know of who can help you, a person by the name of Dr. Stephen Mui. And I sent in a referral at one of our top hospitals here. I won't mention the hospital, and I won't mention the other people involved in what happened. But when I got there, I saw another doctor, a little boy doctor I call him, fresh from university. I asked him to please switch me to Dr. Stephen Mui, because he had microbiology reports from a university, and he was waiting to see me and interested in my case. The little boy doctor lied to my face. I left, and he said that he'd do that for me. And I waited for 2 months at home, and it ended up he had dobbed him or lagged him or reported him to the head of the department. And the head of the department then had a meeting with the little boy doctor who reported him, and Dr. Stephen Mui was banned from helping me or seeing me, and I was discharged. This is one of our major hospitals in Melbourne. I was discharged and I wasn't even told, and I was left at home in agony for 2 months waiting until I rang up and found out this evil story. The head of the department I'd already seen sometime before, and that person simply said, I'll go and see a psychiatrist, I'm not interested in your case. And she threw the reports in the rubbish bin. So I've got really serious problems here with the medical profession here, but that's another story. This is about the cryotherapy treatment. These are just some of the reports, legitimate reports, just to show you that this is a very serious, legitimate case, well documented, well recorded. These are even samples I've had to send to the United States showing high levels of neurotoxins in the body. All these have been thrown in the rubbish bin by every single specialist I've seen, except for the specialist Piers Canty, who was the first specialist I saw, and he immediately got me in, and he didn't have any reports. He just went on my symptoms and what I was saying. He was amazed I'd done any microscopy work and was astounded that I was so interested in my own case. I said, well, I have to. The pathology labs we're using at the moment aren't recording anything. 2 other specialists, I'll give them credit, eventually did bronchoscopies, but only one of the 3 bronchoscopies reported 3 different fungi in the lungs. That was not sent to the private companies, Melbourne Pathology and Dorevitch, who didn't report anything, but rather to St Vincent's Pathology, one of the main hospitals here. They immediately found 3 different fungi in the bronchoscopy, but that specialist then refused to give me intravenous and only gave me an itraconazole tablet, 100 milligrams. But I told him my GP has already given me 600 milligrams of that for 3 months and it didn't clear it. He refused to ring my GP. He said, take it for 4 weeks, and if it doesn't work, stop taking it. And that was the last contact I had with that specialist. These are some of the natural antifungals that are keeping me alive at the moment. I'll just click through that so you can stop on them. They are helpful. They do attack the infection, this combination. In various combinations, I'll use these. This is the cryotherapy and some of the other things I've been using as well, which can hit the infection, can break it apart for a little while, but it grows back so quickly, and it's now at a critical mass level. They're the symptoms. I'll let you read that. I won't read it all through, but it's essentially like meningitis now. There's more of the symptoms, and it's now certainly a life and death battle for me. Every single day I nearly die, and yet I forgive all these people. I have no hatred in me towards these people, despite their incompetence, their negligence, and also threatening people and blocking me from getting help. I mean, that is a level of evil that I had no idea was going on. When I said to my GP, why don't you call them? He said, they'll sue me. They'll sue me because I'll be implying they're negligent, which he knows they are. I had no idea that was going on. So we've got very serious problems. I'll address that in another video. This, just to show you one other thing, this is what I was coughing up when my GP gave me voriconazole. For the first time, someone gave me an antifungal, and it took us 6 months of useless reports from the pathology labs, the private ones, before we got a result of aspergillus. This isn't aspergillus, fumigatus, but once he gave me the voriconazole, and we increased the dosage up to 600, it was not doing much at a low dose he gave me, I started coughing this up from deep in the lungs. This image I took eventually. We had more images, but once this was happening and the voriconazole didn't work, I saw one of the top immunologists, again at one of the top hospitals in Melbourne. I won't mention it, or their names involved, to protect them. He was a microbiologist and an immunologist, and one of the top in Melbourne. And this is one of the major hospitals. I showed him these images that I was coughing up after the antifungal voriconazole, all the symptoms. I was really still in big trouble then. That's in 2023. And, or rather before that, I think that was 2018, sorry. So he said he didn't know what it was. He'd take it to the head mycologist at the hospital in the pathology lab. I thought, oh, fantastic. I'm finally getting someone who's taking this seriously and who is going to make sure that I'm helped and is going to get the best possible person on the job, the head mycologist. The head mycologist looked at this and also didn't know what it was. So they both said, we've never seen this before. And the head mycologist at one of their major hospitals said, it looks like a vegetative thing to me. That was what the specialist told me. He said, therefore, you must be contaminating your slides. We don't know what it is. We've never seen it. So it can't be in your lung. Now, I was shocked at that. I know that looks like yeast. Even I know that from my horticultural training. But they had no idea what that was. And these are the top mycology experts in one of the major hospitals in Melbourne, Australia. I was absolutely shocked. And then he said, there's nothing in your lung. I'm not seeing you anymore. And I just couldn't believe it. And that went on and on and on. Now this turns out to be geotrichum, and they're the arthroconidia chains, and I'll show you that later. But right now, I shall move on because it's very important that this is demonstrated. So this is the process. First of all, to do cryotherapy treatment, deep breathing of cold air, very cold air, you need to rug up. I'm in there for about 45 minutes at a time, and so I have layers of clothing on, and there's a fan in there that runs in cycles, and it will run for about 15 minutes, dropping the temperature down to -19. Then it will shut off, and then it will slowly creep up to 15 and then cut in again. I'll show you what I do. Now, of course, a woolen cap, you'll need that for particularly the ears get very cold, and then also you need to wear a small mask on the nose because the wind, or the fan in there on the compressor there on the refrigeration unit. It blows the air straight into my face, which is fantastic, and I just breathe that straight in for 45 minutes, and that's about the limit. I wear mittens, and on top of the mittens I also wear another glove as well. So the fingertips and toes can go first once you're in there for too long. I'll leave this hand free so I can use the camera. Actually, yeah, I'll take this off as well for the moment. So there's mittens and gloves, a woolen hat, nose protector, and then you're ready to go. So I've got a dressing gown, another coat, and then another shirt and a t-shirt, and I've got long johns on, and also tracksuit pants over that, and I'm also wearing sheepskin Ugg boots. So you've got to really rug up, because the idea is to get the cold air in the lung. And then at the end of the session, for 5 minutes, I strip off all these top of the clothes, all of them, and bare the chest and the top of the torso, because we know it's in the skin. I've got evidence of that, again, that's in the images you'll see later on. My GP even saw the skin change in colour. The biopsies, we unfortunately sent them to private labs in Melbourne, and they were absolutely useless. They reported nothing. So I do that for 5 minutes, really chill the body from the outside and the inside, and during that time it'll begin to break up the biofilm, break up the fungal mass. I'll have more poison dumping into the bloodstream to hit the brain. I have passed out in my friend's fruit shop doing this. I've passed out here at home doing it, not because the cold air makes you do that, it's because it's breaking apart the neurotoxic infection, which then dumps an extra spike of poison. Any natural, any normal, logical, sensible, intelligent mycologist or doctor would understand that process. So that's what's happening, but it works. I've got to gauge it though. So I'll show you now what we do, and I'll take the camera in, and hopefully you'll have a good idea of how to save lives using this very novel treatment, which works. And it's kept me alive now for 10 months. Now that is that's the freezer there. Hopefully, I can't see, I'm not in front of the computer, so hopefully you can see this. It's a Mesa, $11,000 worth. Had to get it down from Sydney. It's working really well. And I've also have here is where I have the small sort of Tupperware, really sealed with a fan, and the oils I put in here. And I simply put the oils in here. These are essential oils. You must be careful what oils you use. Many oils are fantastically antifungal and antibacterial. And then I've just put this on, the lid back on, like so. And then I have a small switch here. And then I just have to press that, and the fan is on. And that will pipe the air, the very cold air from the freezer, through this piping system that I've made up, which is copper piping with insulation, and the copper piping and insulation goes through into the other room here, and this is where it comes out, where I sit at the computer, and I have that mask on perhaps for 3 or 4 hours if I'm on the computer trying to research things, and I'll hop in the freezer again, and that is where I then receive the very cold air. It's not as cold as being in the freezer, but it definitely is helping suppress the fungal infection growth while I'm on the computer. So we switch it on, and at the moment the fan is not spinning and whirring and making a lot of noise, but this is where I come in, close the door. Here I have a box here full of steel plates, which acts as a sort of as the air from the refrigeration unit is blown out. The pipe has an inlet here, which takes the cold air in and down to this, through this box of metal plates sealed, and it goes out through the pipe here, as you can see, to the little fan on the other side, and that drags the very cold air out, as cold as I can make it, for the computer. So what I do is I stand here. Once the fan comes on, it'll be very noisy, but I'll do it now while I can. I stand here. This is the fan, blows the air straight into my face here, and then I'll begin breathing. It'll be just deep breathing. And after about 15 minutes, there's the motor coming on now in the fan, so it'll be a little bit noisy. But this is the main process I use to kill the infection and prevent my body from dying every day in Melbourne, Australia. Abandoned by the medical profession, I've been driven to find out this novel way of treatment, and it does work. I am increasing it now. I've taken care of all my earthly affairs. My will's ready and the house is ready to be sold if I die. And now I will really hammer this infection using this cryotherapy treatment. So that's just the unit there, and I stand here. And after about 15 minutes, the biofilm and the neurotoxic growth in the lung will really begin to break up. And as it does break up, I'm able to cough and cough and cough. I can hardly ever get it up out of the lung now because it's so viscous. Its viscosity has increased and increased. Every year I've been attacking it with different natural things, but what I can cough out, you can see here, this mug is full of frozen infection. I've been coughing that up now for the last 6 months here after I bought this unit, this freezer unit, because I was a bit concerned about my fruiterer friends. If I died in their freezer, that could be a bit awkward for them and the authorities. So that's why I had to buy this for home, and also I use this right through the day and the night time, so it is better to have it here anyway. But that's how much of the infection I've coughed up. It's very difficult to get out of the lung now, but already you can hear the voice getting a little croaky, and that is the effect of the very cold air, the cryotherapy treatment of this extremely minus 19 degrees. Between minus 15 to 19 is the cycle, and it stays steady on that. And the fan, of course, is driving the air straight into my face. And then it's just a matter of deep breathing. And then part of what I've been doing is I'll take a deep breath and hold it in the lungs. And eventually, after about 10 or 15 minutes, as this penetrates the infection and the biomass body of the neurotoxic fungal yeast infection, I'll begin to have very strong waves of poison travelling from the brain through to the feet. The entire body goes numb and limp, and I'll often sort of just collapse against the side of the freezer if I'm not careful, and but I can gauge it now. I know how to do it to kill the infection enough, break it apart enough, so I get the waves of poison from the neurotoxins being broken apart by simply this most natural treatment you could ever have in the world for a deadly infection. And it works, and this could save lives around the world. The medical profession in Melbourne couldn't care less about me. They don't care about any of the information I've got or any of the research I've done. I pray to heaven above that in Europe or the United States or anywhere in the rest of the world, somebody will understand exactly what I'm saying, quite obviously, and investigate this and test it for yourselves. This unit here it's a perfect size to have a nurse sitting here with the patient. You can have a window on the door. It doesn't have to be completely claustrophobic like this one could be. So you can have a window, a nurse, and someone sitting here and getting this treatment. It's keeping me alive and preventing my body from dying. And I've been driven to do this through the incompetency and the negligence and the corruption of the medical profession in Melbourne, Australia regarding fungi and yeast treatments. We have brilliant surgeons and brilliant doctors in other areas, really brilliant. But this area is very, very poor. Now this works, and it has kept me alive now for 10 months, and I'm now doing 3 hours a day, 45-minute sessions by 4, and I have to increase that now because I still nearly die every morning because the critical mass in the body is very large now. It is a critical mass level. Everything improves after I'm in here for 45 minutes. My voice changes, the lungs open up more. The more I clear, the more I kick back the infection, the more the mind, of course, clears. It's all to do with killing the neurotoxic infection and reducing that biofilm mass. So this is it. Then I'll take off all this top at 40 minutes, and then I'll stand in here for 5 minutes to chill the entire skin of the chest, because we know it is systemic and we've got clear evidence it's in the skin tissue, the adipose tissue, right through. So it's extremely important. This can save lives. My entire life savings are gone. I've been left to die, but I'll share this with the world. And please contact me. It's on the video, the contact address. So I'll get out and show you the computer part of it that I use the mask and the cold air for as well. Coming out. So I showed you the setup of the fan there with the oils in it and the pipe, and then I just simply press this button. It's a very cheap fan from Amazon, and that runs fast, medium or low. I put it on fast, and the air travels through the piping, and then it comes around here. And I'll just set this camera up for you to show you how I can spend now 1, 2, 3 hours on the computer here next to the freezer, and I can in fact continue to attack the infection just using the cold air that is coming from the freezer now, which is on and running. And yes, you can see me there, good. This is the mask I use. Now it's a simple dusk mask from a hardware store. I had to get flexi hose to suit and all the rest of it and make a little clamp for it to go on properly. You close off this vent hole here. You just want the air coming in through the freezer, the cold air, cryotherapy treatment, into the mask, a good mask so it's sealed, and that's, I can feel that coming through now. Now that's also carrying the aerosol essential oils. I won't mention them because you need to see a naturopath. I know a lot about oils. There are ones that are too strong, very strong antifungal, very strong antibacterial, stronger than most antibiotics. They're very powerful, but they can burn the lung a little bit. So you've got to have the soft or gentle essential oils that are still antifungal and can still break down the biofilm matrix. And as any specialist around the world who's a good mycologist knows, they're adaptive. They can alter the matrix. The biofilm matrix can alter if you attack it with different things. These fungi are very clever. So I will put this on, and it just simply clips on. There, I'm quite comfortable, and I can sit here for hours. I'm hoping to get well and start growing essential oils and distilling them in the countryside, but I'm stuck in Melbourne at the moment because of the deadly illness. So I'll sit here for hours and just investigate various things that I am interested in. But I can just sit here for hours like this, work on the computer, and the cold air is constantly coming in, and the longer the cold air flows through I've used copper pipes, but steel would be fine too. I used poly pipe initially, but you really need to use metal piping, and it of course is insulated with lagging or insulation to keep it as cold as possible as it travels from the freezer, the cryotherapy freezer, into the lungs. And it is quite cold, and I've had moments here where I've even had moments where I've gone a bit dizzy and a bit faint because it's attacking the biofilm, but you really need to be in the freezer for that to really happen. But this will suppress the growth. It will reduce its ability to keep reproducing while I'm on it. So that's that's what I've been doing to keep myself alive, and it really does work. I'll just turn that off now. There we are. So that's the cryotherapy treatment, which I've been driven to discover, to utilise, and it's prevented me from dying now for 10 months here in Melbourne, Australia, and it can save lives around the world. It's a very natural, non-toxic way to kill and break apart biofilms where people are in fact dying, like myself. I'm nearly poisoned to death every single day, and it's very important. And in fact, I have to write a letter of thanks to the 19 specialists who left me to die in agony, hopefully once I'm cured, because it's their negligence, incompetence, and just complete lack of care for me that drove me to find and discover this very simple method. There it is there. Even that little bit of cold air, those few moments in the cryotherapy treatment chamber, I call it, medical room, $11,000 it cost me in Australian dollars, but well worth it. As I say, for 10 months now, it's prevented the body dying every day, but I have to escalate the time now in the freezer and continue with my natural medications. Diet is very important, of course, no sugar and those sorts of things. It's an antifungal or anti-yeast diet, and so that's the most important part of all. That is what will save a life in the world of someone who's being treated for a serious systemic yeast infection in particular, because we know yeast can't stand the cold, they break apart. The biofilm breaks apart. I don't know how effective it would be for aspergillus or penicillium or rhizopus, I don't know, or fungal balls, I don't know about that. But the hyphal structure, I imagine, would break apart. It just seems they can't deal with this very cold air. So it would be well worth investigating for these other human pathology fungi, but the ones I've got are very unusual, and the images I've got are very unusual, but they are exact and correct, and so that's the main part. Now what I'll do now is I'll switch over to these images. The only other thing I will show you is a report that I'll be sending to the Government of Australia, and it will be simply to get the federal government to step in, and they need to pass a law, because my GP said he refused to contact a specialist who has misdiagnosed me because he's frightened they will sue him for implying that specialist is negligent. I had no idea that was going on. No Australian understands that's going on, but it is. It's a sick culture. The medical profession is sick. Instead of everyone coming together to help me, everyone's frightened to say anything. No one's going to defend me. No one's going to challenge a complete misdiagnosis. No one's going to challenge it. I had no idea that was going on, but it's happening. The government must protect all medical professionals, from nurses, GPs, general practitioners to the specialists. If anyone wishes to speak up and offer a counter opinion, a counter diagnosis, or even insist on another test being done because of their opinion, in this case my GP's known me for 40 years, and a specialist sees me for 10 or 15 minutes and then summarises it as, I'll get lost, I'm not doing anything, I need more reports, and they refuse to ring my general practitioner. They refused. They look down on general practitioners. They're like dirt. Now I'm beneath them. I'm treated worse than they treat general practitioners. Patients in Melbourne, Australia, and probably throughout Australia, we're on the outer edge now. They're at the centre. They only care about themselves. These are the particular doctors involved in immunology, respiratory, fungal diseases. It's all about them and their mates and protecting their mates. So the government has to pass a law that anyone, any medical professional, can offer an opinion, counter diagnosis, and never be allowed to be sued by the other medical practitioner. That has to be a law. It was given to me in writing by one general practitioner. My medical insurance company will not cover me if I question the pathology labs. I just simply couldn't believe that. He said, no, I'm not going to question them. They could sue me. I could be implying they're negligent or incompetent, and that opens the door up for them to sue me. I had no idea this sick culture is right through the system of the medical profession in Australia, and it'd be wonderful to hear some doctors on radio or somewhere speak out who see this and actually back me up. It's the truth. And GPs are frightened to talk about it, specialists are frightened to talk about it, nurses are frightened. It's a culture of fear, money, and the Hippocratic Oath is, it used to be do no harm. The Hippocratic Oath today is whatever you do, don't get sued. That's what they teach them at university. Now that'll be to the government, so that involves passing a law to indemnify all medical people from speaking openly, to protect a patient, to help the patient survive, to find a cure for a patient, to have a counter opinion. And the second thing is all pathology labs in Australia must perform a test for yeast, particularly if someone's coughing it up out of their lung or it's in the skin. They can't say, oh, it's commensal, we don't have to do it. That is rubbish. People die of systemic yeast infections around the world every day. pathology labs in Melbourne must be forced by law. If a GP or a specialist requests all yeasts to be reported and identified from any pathology biopsy or lung sample, or wherever it is, urine, they must report them. They have been asked twice by GPs to report all yeasts to me, and they have blank refused. They say legally they don't have to do it, so they won't. It's disgraceful. And then universities is a third one. Well, their culture is sick. What they're turning out, this little boy at this major hospital who reported the other doctor who was waiting to see me, contacted with, liaising with a university microbiologist, that little boy to ingratiate himself to the director. Oh, what a good little boy you are. Pat on the head from that director. And the other doctor who's recommended, is the only one in Melbourne who I had a chance with, was blocked from treating me. Now that is evil. And the universities seem to be turning out these children, big on power, ladder climbing, prestige, but any compassion, empathy, working together with others to help the patient, the universities are churning out the wrong sort of people. So that's their problem, and you can't pass that law. They have to contact me, and I'll come and give some lectures, and my GP will. And Piers Canty can. He was a brilliant specialist who really cared about me. He needs to teach the other 19 specialists. They need to have a class with him. So that's the main thing about the cryotherapy that I presented. You don't have to watch the rest at all. The thing is, this evidence is undeniable. It is totally undeniable. And I will now, if I can just get this a bit more centered here. Where are we? Why aren't you moving there? Oh, not there we are. Okay, okay, well this is where I started coughing up. Now I'll go through, I've got about 10,000 images, so there's a lot of images here, and I'll just go through them fairly steadily. Of course you can pause this video at any stage and have a detailed look at them. My contact details, of course, are on various bits of the reports here, but it's jcinfocus@gmail.com, and I'm happy to talk to you and liaise with you and share all the information and what I've had to do to fight to stay alive and not die from this deadly neurotoxic infection, and share all the images. You're welcome to use them free of charge, use them in lectures, use them at universities. This is a brilliant case study for a patient who's fighting for their life, who's been abandoned, left to die through negligence, incompetence, and arrogance, I'm afraid. That's part of the sickness of the medical profession, the ivory tower syndrome. So it would be a great case study, because the evidence I've got, not many patients have the background I've got in horticulture to do this. So it's a really wonderful case study. And of course I don't hate anyone, but unfortunately they need to be re-educated, these specialists. Never mind. So this is what we started coughing up. This is September 2018, and I've been extremely ill ever since then, every day. So, but it's gotten much worse now, and it really is quite deadly. I'll see if I can't get this in a better position here. Hang on a moment. Just so I can alter the size a little bit. Okay, we just want to make sure it's all on, getting all on the page there. Oh, very touchy, these computer thingies. Okay, there we go. Now this is most likely geotrichum, which was identified by a PCR DNA testing, because the mainstream private labs were useless. They wouldn't report any sort of yeast at all. And geotrichum, it's probably parasiticus or something, it could be candidium. But if you notice the shapes here, you've got very small circular cells, which are clearly yeast-like cells, and I've got images here that are really worth looking at, because you won't see them anywhere else on the internet. The arthroconidid chains of geotrichum come in different shapes and sizes, and this is what's happening. They don't understand that the hyphae are broken apart. These are the segments, and the segments themselves are now developing their own peculiar growth habits. It's geotrichum, or something extremely similar. So that's what I was coughing up after 2 or 3 months on voriconazole as we increased the dosage. It wasn't doing anything at 100 milligrams. Even I knew I had to have 600, but the GP was worried about the liver, and it was doing nothing. But once we kicked it up to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, immediately it started clearing the infection. It's a shame we didn't start at 600. It may well have solved it, but unfortunately these mistakes are made with good intention. So this is what's coming up now from the lungs still to this day, but I can't cough up anymore now. It's too viscous and too deep, and there are other things involved. So you can see the shapes are quite varied. Now this is a web photo of geotrichum, and you can see how the chain there, and I've cultured this many times, and you can see the chain on the top there beginning to break apart into the arthroconidia segments, and there they are below. And there's another example of geotrichum segments, and you can see the variation on the structures. That's why the people here are very limited in their knowledge. I'm a gardener, and I could figure this out just given time and research, but I'm also trained in microscopy work, so I just had to adapt from plants plants and insects to human body. It was a learning curve, but I've done quite well with that. Now this is again a web photo of the chains of the geotrichum arthroconidia chain segments, and pardon me, that's the biofilm and the neurotoxins. Now there's my culturing of sputum. Pretty sure that's the sputum one, yep. Day 6, of course, it grows very rapidly. That was transferred to another plate, and there are the hyphae developing on the plate, and you can clearly see the structures are arthroconidia, and you can clearly see there examples of the different sizes and shapes of the different chain links in the hyphae. So when they saw those individually, this top specialist and the top mycologist at one of our major public hospitals in Melbourne, they had no idea what they were looking at. And then they dismissed me as all my microscopy work must be rubbish. That's why I had to get a professor from a university to come to my home. And they didn't charge me anything, the university people. These people can charge like wounded bulls. They sent me broke. So there it is. So it's clearly these chains of most likely geotrichum, and also when the university grew a culture for me, they grew 2 penicillium, which is easily identifiable. But then there was another one which was described as a white filamentous, which didn't seem to grow any fruiting bodies. That's the geotrichum. They couldn't do any more for me. It was a miracle and a wonder to me that they even bothered to do that for me when other pathology labs were doing nothing worth talking about. So, but I know what that is, and it's geotrichum. Again, you can see it here clearly. Now that's a 2022 agar sputum, and on the right there is a 2021, and it is the exact same element, still in the lungs, still undoubtedly poisoning my body to death. But there are other things involved. There could be a wood fungi and other such things. So it's a tricky business, but at least this I know falls apart in cold air. Now there's so many, as I say, again you can see the different structures over here on the left. Photo of the microscopy work I do. They're at a 400 magnification, and you can see, and they're all wet mounts. I was staining initially, but then I realised wet mounts actually were more consistent and much easier to identify the elements. The trouble with staining, I realise there's a role for that, but instead I just use KOH, which is highly alkaline, and I'll show you what that does. It's brilliant. But you can see there, and that's why when these hyphal structures fall apart, in Melbourne, Australia, we're a very small population, fungal cases are relatively rare, and the people involved in a very small number, and they don't really have much knowledge of anything outside Aspergillus, Penicillium, maybe Rhizopus, and yeast. I don't even know if they've ever reported anyone dying of a systemic yeast infection in Australia, because the pathology labs refuse to report yeast. So if you look it up, it probably says no one's ever died of a systemic yeast infection in Australia. Guess why? They never report yeast. It is mind-boggling. There we are. There's another typical example of what they're seeing that I cough up. The hypha structure's broken apart. They see these individually and think, what the hell's that? I've never seen that, therefore it can't exist. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Does that mean if they find a new infection, a new virus like COVID, they say, I've never seen it before, so it can't exist. So we won't try any medicines because we've never seen it before. It is stunning. But I forgive them. I'm not mentioning their names on this video to protect them. They've left me to die in agony, and yet here I am protecting their reputation. They know I've got these images, I've sent them to them, and I don't hear anything back because I've got too much knowledge and information there. But you can see, now here's a beautiful shot. Geotrichum, systemic infection. Hyphae growing, slowly breaking apart. The elements all appear very different. What is it? When you only see the broken apart elements, the Arthrochonidia chains by themselves, you don't know what you're looking at. But you've got to say it's fungal or yeast. You've got to at least say that. But then once you can culture it and you see the hyphae structure and you understand, and you've got a report like I got from a PCR DNA from the sputum, Geotrichopsis, I think it was Parasiticus. Then it made perfect sense, Geotrichum. The cultures look like Geotrichum, that's Geotrichum structure, Arthrochonidia. I researched it, I found the answer. I've paid over $200,000 for someone else to do it for me who are supposed to do this work. They've never even mentioned it. That's what I'm coughing up, oceans of it. Now I'll move through these fairly quickly now. I won't talk so much because there's so many. I'll just stop at the really interesting ones. That's the original one that they had no idea what they were looking at, but now you can see they are the chains of the hyphae of the Arthrochonidia, chains of Geotrichum most likely. More cultures, often this pink one came up, and you can see the cell within the cell, really common in all my pathology samples, the cell within the cell. I did a lot of testing on agar plates for natural medicines. Horopedo oil, you can see there, has quite a good kill zone. That's why I take it along with other things. I had to do all this research. I've got, I don't know how many plates I cultured, but hundreds probably. And I've got many photos of those. Now this came out of the sinuses when I was actually cleaning a wall with ammonia. And of course ammonia is an antifungal. And of course this has flowed out, and this started to open up more and more the understanding that this is a big time systemic infection. This does look like rototorula as well, unfortunately, but we can see the starch molecules and again all these yeast cells. But whatever it is, it may be a morphology, something that's morphed into a combination. But you can see there on the side the web photo, and you can see my photos, and they're almost identical. Oh, which way are we going there? Going backwards. We'll go this way. Again, you can see the, now this is the biopsy in the chest. See, this is the problem I've got. That biopsy was sent to the private lab here in Melbourne, and they said there's no mycology there whatsoever. And there it is, a mass under my skin in the adipose tissue. It's everywhere. I can feel it. You can feel it tingling and prickling the whole skin and the lung. Oh, where are we now? Back one there. So it's there. So you can see the concentric circles there in the starch cells that match my own. That's the biopsy from the chest. Now that's in urine. Now if that's in urine, if that's in the chest, if that's in the lungs, I would call that a systemic infection myself, but I'm just a gardener. There's another close-up of these various concentric sort of starch-like cells combining with the yeast infection itself, and the mass, that's in urine. Urine again, just a mass of it. Urine again, a mass of it. Now these are also kicking around unfortunately in the urine. They could be mycorrhizal. There's another one of the outbreak on the forehead of the skin, the same thing. These outbreaks form ridges and burst out of the skin. Forehead outbreak. There's a rash there that appeared on the right side. I've always had pain there on that right side for a long time, for years. Underlying pain in the lung, etc., but in the skin also. And if you look at this, again you can see the Arthrochonidia type structures and the different shapes, and that's from a ridge on the skin that broke out. When I treat the body, different treatments, new ones, could cause a breakout like this to occur because it's pushing the fungus to die, etc. So it'll sort of seek some shelter by getting out. But there it is again. This is the skin rash that broke out, and this is well and truly in the biopsies as well. These are the skin biopsies taken by a doctor. This is just my own scraping of the rash that burst out on the skin. but it's the same as the deep biopsies that have been taken as well. This is with KOH, 10%, and it really works very well. It's highly alkaline and it can stimulate hyphal growth, I found out, and I'll show you some stunning pictures of that. Again here, if you look closely, you can see the different shapes, the sort of bending, twisting, spaghetti-like arthroconidia with the round ones, smaller, larger, etc. There's just a little collage of the different photos of the different parts of the skin rash, clearly showing the variation of the cellular structures of the arthroconidia hypha segments, and that is right through the body. It's a critical mass. That's just typical sort of penicillium there on the colony 2, but that colony 1's interesting because the PCR test picked up a wood fungi in the sputum. I'm not surprised. I've cut down a lot of dead trees that have died from fungal growths, killing the tree, and then they have the bracts that come out, which you often see on dead trees. The mushroom-like bracts that come out, the fungi bracts, and the spores that leave there, and cutting up dead wooden trees filled with those hypha and spores all around the place, and in a chainsaw you get a lot of dust out of that, and it may well have come in through that way as well. We can see here the Ganoderma spore, a very close match. Again, there's another, that was a torso skin, that was another part of the skin, and it's the same thing. Now this is the punch biopsy chest in 2021, and you can see again the punch biopsy chest. There it is again. That was a deep doctor punch into the chest, adipose tissue, and the lab we sent it to said there is no mycology present, and that's the problem. So these are all part of the fungal yeast infection. Now this is with KOH. KOH is stunning because it's so alkaline. As anyone would know in mycology, if you've got nail fungus or something, you'll use KOH to remove the sort of biological elements of the body, the nail or something. It leaves behind the fungi, highly alkaline. But what I discovered, I was using bicarb soda at one stage, inhaling that because bicarb soda can kill fungi. But I found out through research, some yeast love high alkalinity. And so I stopped inhaling bicarb soda. Because once I saw these results from the KOH testing the sputum, I realised that alkalinity is not something I should be using to kill the fungi. Again, we can see here, this is the punch biopsy. Again, you can see the varied shapes and sizes, which is fooling the so-called specialists here who have limited knowledge. I understand that. Everyone has limited knowledge, but they think they know everything, and that's part of the problem. So you can see the hypha shooting away there from a clump of the yeast, and I'm going to call it yeast because it has all the characteristics of yeast growth and the hypha growth, but it may be some sort of morphed yeast now. Now this is a 2024 chest biopsy where things are much worse that year, and it's much worse now as I nearly die every day. This is a mass, a circular mass of the infection, treated with KOH, and you can see what happens. It is bursting, literally bursting at the seams with hyphal growth, pinhead type hypha, classic yeast, candida, etc. type growths. That is one that hasn't yet burst apart, but it will. There's one on the left pre-KOH, one on the right treating with high alkaline KOH 10%. Leave it for a little while, and that's what starts happening on the slide at room temperature. You can see there the structures beginning to swell and move and reproduce. Again, there's further along the path of the KOH treatment, the biopsy from the chest. This is a doctor's taken this biopsy, and because they know how superior my microscopy work is, of course, and because he's a real doctor, he would give me these biopsies and we'd send one off at the same time. Now they were alongside each other, so they can't say, oh well, you know, we sent one where it wasn't. It's right alongside. So it's undeniable. So this is how they grow. It's very strange, very unusual. It's perhaps unique, but even so, it's worth investigating because something new could be learnt to help other people who are dying from these terrible infections. Again, this is 2024, and you can see how the smooth circular surface of this yeast mass, we'll call it, begins to transform, burst apart, and hypha start coming out. That's just with KOH treatment. Now I found out here the labs won't use KOH. I asked them to through the doctor, but they won't do it. No matter what avenue I tried to get them to understand they need to do better research, they refused. So here you can see the smooth circular yeast mass now bursting into this extraordinary, just unbelievable reproduced mass of just elements that are almost indescribable. But you can see the hyphae that are starting to grow outside the mass itself, and the pinhead classic yeast type hyphae growth. So we know it's a systemic yeast infection. This is the biopsy from the chest. So there's lots of these pardon me. I've got lots of these images which are quite unique, but anyone's free to use them. I'm not going to charge you for any of these. They're free, and they'd make a fantastic study for any university, any professor at a university who's interested. Take this up. Use it as a case sample for your students, a difficult case sample. The patient's left to die in Melbourne, Australia, and yet look at all this evidence. How come it's being missed? What are they not doing? What should they be doing? This is a brilliant case study to help save lives, and all the evidence is, I'll give it to you freely. I've done all the research, I've spent all the money, $200,000, my whole life savings, so I've done all that. You just have to take it into a professional lab should be doing this, of course, but I'm being blocked. So you can see how these masses grow, and they are really, really vigorous. Different forms, and of course fungi can reproduce in different stages, in different ways. Microspores can be produced in the hyphae. They don't even have to produce conidiphore or flowering body at all, spore body. They can produce in a number of ways. That is one of the smooth bodies before it's gone ballistic. You can see here long hyphae and lots of the infection. Now that's the first biopsy on the right in June 21. Again, my GP, knowing me for 40 years, gave me a sample, and there it is, loaded with the infection back in 21. And here I am fighting for my life, and it's right through the body, still untreated by the medical profession, the professionals. That's a funny word. And you can see the exact same problem, the exact same infection deep in the adipose tissue and muscle tissue. There's the biopsy again. As I say, I'll move through these now fairly. I'll leave enough time for you to pause on it if you want to examine each one. That's no KOH. If I put KOH on that, they'll begin to blast out with hyphae. The KOH stimulates high alkalinity. This particular form of yeast loves alkalinity, and it really takes off. But without KOH, it's slower. So they're the masses, and they're from the biopsy in 2024. This is back at 2019, and you can see them there, the exact same things. Mostly circular in these early ones. But you can see them all there, the cell within the cell. That's right through the flesh. Sputum 2024, and there's the same mass that's in the skin in the lung sputum. Lungs, and you can see the yeast masses beginning to burst out under the high alkaline treatment of KOH, which proves that they won't use it. Again, these very large, almost chlamydospore-like casings are there, but there could be another thing again. Sputum 24, sputum 24, sputum 24, sputum, more sputum. This is all in the lung. I can't get these up as easy now anymore. I've stopped the microscopy work because I'm too far gone with the infection. I'm in too much agony now. It's like meningitis, all day and all night. But that's why I want to share this, to save some lives in case I'm about to leave my body behind and head off. Now you can see here under KOH, these are really interesting ones. This is July 21, so it's a different month, a different sample, same problem. That's the sort of sample I'm coughing up, and I'll show you another one in a minute in what a specialist told me about it. It's quite interesting. So this is the KOH. I've coughed up a mass of the yeast from the lung that's killing probably the most neurotoxic one. KOH treatment on the slide left at room temperature and come back 10 minutes later and that's what you've got. Massive, massive, massive hyphal stimulation and growth. I laughed when I saw this. It looks like the map of Australia. I'm down the bottom right hand corner dying just down there in Melbourne. And it's almost, my body's a bit like that. It's completely covered. It's as if Australia's covered in yeast, so am I. So you can see quite clearly the pinhead type hypha, classic yeast type hypha, systemic hyphal death from yeast. A yeast systemic infection kills you. In Melbourne, I don't even know if they know that. They're that poor. Again, we can see these interesting chains. So it could be still some form of geotrichum and another yeast like Rhodotorula. It's possibly a combination. Again, you can see the hypha beginning to grow there off what was originally just a mass of cells of yeast, and now under KOH, 10% stimulation, they're all beginning to shoot into hypha. It's a really interesting case study. Any university, I think, would pay me money for this, but you can have it for free. So again, you can see now there's a typical example of what I see on the slide after I let the slide rest in KOH. This is a sputum from the lung, wet mount, all sterile. You can't possibly contaminate every single slide for 7 years in a house that's relatively dust free, certainly fungal free. I know it's not super sterile, but you can't do this. You'd have to be outside in the backyard near a rubbish tip and drop it on the dirt. But the professor and the GP who came to my home said, no, you're doing great work. There you go. Now this is interesting. This is a time lapse to show you how fast these yeast hypha grow. I think I took a photo about every 15 minutes. This is just at room temperature on the slide. And that's in my lungs and in the body. And my body's warm. That's the problem. That's why the cryotherapy at the moment is, you can see there another hypha shooting out down the base there. And they have such different shapes. That's what's fooling them here. It is an unusual infection, I'll grant them that. But that's their job. It's not my job to do this. But I'm happy to share it, but they don't want anything to do with me. As one specialist said to me, after he threw the reports in the rubbish bin, he said, I want more reports, more fungal reports. I said, what about my symptoms? They're like meningitis. And I described them to him, the massive head pain, the wooziness, the stiff neck. His reply to me was, your self-evidence means nothing to me. And that is exactly what 19 out of the 20 specialists essentially ended up saying to me. I mean nothing to them is what they'll say. Now there it is again. We'll just move through this. There's so many, as I said, I've got about 10,000 images, so this is actually a small amount. Again, there's typical of what I was coughing up when I could loosen it, very creamy coloured, and notice the bubbles, the air bubbles, gas bubbles. And of course, as anyone in mycology could say around the world, what does yeast produce? It produces a gas. Why does flatbread rise when you put yeast in it? Why are there little fluffy holes in the bread? The yeast produces the gas, but also neurotoxins. So we're at 2020 November. It's always the same. There's 19, same thing. Arthroconidia, different shapes, different sizes. These unusual encapsulated elements are there. I did keep pigeons when I was young, it's a bit like Cryptococcus, but I've seen them. They're very faintly outlined. They're producing cells, spores. Whether that's the one that's neurotoxic, we'll never know. You can see the arthroconidia change very clearly there. That's in September 22. These dates are all over every year, same thing, year after year, week after week. Again, you can see the different sizes of the change of the arthroconidia, which is what's confusing the not well-educated specialists here in Melbourne. They're not worldly. They're, as I say, very small population. I understand that, but blimey, that's their job. If I can research it and find it, why can't they? So again, these are just general examples of the mass. This is the mass of yeast in my lungs, not just a bit of yeast that's commensal, which is of course, that's what the pathology labs are saying. They know it's not commensal. They refuse to report it. So there's lots of elements. It's a hypha. There's another hyphal It's like these are structures of hyphae. Looks a bit more like sort of like a rhizopus hyphae, but anyway, or structure. Typical of what I'm coughing up there, 2019. Again, you've got these odd shapes. It's a very strange growing fungus or yeast. But that's all the infection. When they see this under the microscope, they've got no idea what it is, so they never report it. Pathology labs will never report something that they don't understand what it is, no matter how much they see. They won't report it to the specialist. Instead of saying there's something here that's right through the specimen, we don't know what it is, but it needs to be investigated. If they report that, they are saying we're negligent, we're incompetent, we're no good at our job, so they won't report it. So the specialist gets a report saying, nothing there, it's a lie. They know there's something there, but they don't know what it is. They're not going to bother trying to find out what it is or use another company or refer it on. They're not going to do that. And that's the corruption. That's absolute corruption. Corruption in the sense that the patient is uncared for because they want to protect themselves from being sued. That's corruption. That's a moral corruption. There we go there, just plenty of it. And so I'll move through because there are other really interesting images coming up. This is sort of a bit like a trichophyton, but that could be a blow-in from the garden. But the other element there, the circular ones, they're consistent. They're always around. And you can see the way they reproduce there quite clearly. That's at a 1000 magnification. I mean, wow. It's a bit daunting when I used to see these images. I thought, oh, but the cryotherapy has kept me alive for the last 10 months. And I'm going to increase that treatment from here on. These have come up quite often. They're an unusual, almost like a wood fungi bract. There's a wood fungi bract. And there's what I'm coughing up. Very flat, very solid, and that could be part of the problem. There could be a growth, and there are other elements coming up which again appear wood fungi-like, and it has been reported in a PCR DNA test from sputum by an independent lab, and that independent lab's not licensed, so they throw them in the rubbish bin. When you're up against the medical profession, one GP told me that's why they're called the white coat mafia. That's a GP who told me that. The specialists are called the white coat mafia. I said, I understand why. They protect each other. So again, there's the Ganoderma from blood vein grown in broth. And we can see the similarity there. So the wood fungi is a real possibility. So there's a number of samples of those spores with the Ganoderma type fungi. So we'll just head back through those the right way. Now these what I call mud ropes are coming up. They started coming up a couple of years ago as I went deeper into the lung trying to attack it. This could be associated with the wood fungi. They're very thick growth. I thought they may have been some sort of strange oxalite growth, but it appears they're connected to the fungal infection. This could be the neurotoxic infection. I don't know. No one will help me with this. And in Melbourne, it's a very interesting and unusual structure. They grow out. I have seen wood fungi stages of growth where they do have similar things like this. When I was showing this to one of the good GPs, he said, well, it looks like it's coming straight out of your bronchioles. You know, they're getting thinner down one end and they're thicker up the other, and that could make quite good sense. Of course, if that's in the bronchioles, I'm in a bit of trouble. So, but there they are. Now that's in the urine. So whatever this thing is, again, it is systemic. Urine. It's the same thing that's in the lungs. Urine. Again, just more of the same, more of the same. Again, you can see here the masses of hyphae structure there from just a sputum wet mount, 2020. And again, the circular, we'll call them yeast bodies for now, because that would seem to be the main thing. Now this, unfortunately, now glomus, this is the only thing I can find on the internet that this could be a version of a glomus wood fungi. I'm coughing these up, and I have for a long time, but at first I didn't take any notice of them. I thought they're so weird. I couldn't find anything like it. But then when they started to appear a lot more, as I went deeper and deeper into the lung, attacking it with different things, these things started coming up from deep in the bronchioles, and they were coming up regularly. And then I realised this is part of the problem. So the glomus chlamydospores can look a bit like this. You can see the structures there, these curved bridging structures. When I do loosen this up enough, and I'm beginning to loosen a bit up out of the bronchioles, it does feel sort of almost have a gritty, it almost has a gritty sort of sensation to it. And I'm not surprised when I see all these things. So in 2020, these things, that's one that's broken apart. The structures are broken apart. You can see there bits and pieces I'm coughing up from deep in the lung. 2020, they have these structures which are obviously very solid type structures. And again, you can see the all the smaller singular, small spore cells, yeast cells coming out of them. So surrounding them. There's just a typical sputum. Again, you can see here one of these sort of chlamydospore type structures, and on the right you can see how once it reaches maturity, you can see it break apart into hundreds and hundreds of small spores once it's reached its maturity. Sputum again. Sputum in April 20. Sputum in April 17. April 17th, 2020. Now these are mycorrhizal arbuscular spores from the internet. I have been coughing up things similar because I deal a lot with wet soils over my career, plants, wet soils, gardens. I'm overexposed, and these things of course are in the soil. There's one of these what I call tortoise shells or fungal wood structures that has broken apart. There is occasionally a rhizopus or mucor growing on agar. It could be in there, it could be part of it, it could be a blow-in. I don't see the spores that often, but this is everywhere still. Sputum, that looks just like the skin outbreaks, and that's in the lung. Again, you can see the different shapes and sizes scattered throughout this sample in sputum. Same problem in the lung. I'll just move through these because they're a bit repetitive, but I'm using all these to show you different dates, different years, the same thing, same thing, same thing, unreported, unreported, untreated, left to die. That's why I'm showing you these things. But share them. Get interested. It's a really interesting case. Again, you've got these very thick structures, which, as I say, could be a wood fungi type structure. That's just typical of a sputum sample and the yeast, the cell in the cell. I do a lot of agar testing. I don't do any more now. I've had to stop. I'm too ill. Now that sputum coughs straight out of the lung, and you can see the hyphae structure very clearly there, breaking apart. A massive infection in October 2020, another hyphae. Hyphae, October 2020. And on this one you can actually see, you can see the spores developing inside the hyphae, which is not uncommon for a way for fungi to reproduce. Again, sputum, there's a 1000 image on the right and a 400 on the left. They're at 1000s. And here again are these interesting wood type fungi elements, very tough structures, whatever they are. And they're deep in the lungs. Again, a massive infection. Again, these are just to show you the effort I've put in. The sick, dying patient sent broke, and the medical profession in Melbourne have done none of this. Haven't worked anything out. Just sent a few samples in, and all the specialists throw them in the rubbish bin anyway. All the reports, I'll throw it in the rubbish bin. Again, just a typical sample of one of the yeasts. And some of the different things I test mostly are natural because of the refusal to give me the proper intravenous medication and to find out what it is. Now this was a wet mount, but I think this was actually left on the slide for a few days and it grew like that. I don't think that was directly from the lung. That's directly from the lung. Yeah, this was in a container, so I'll cough it up into a sterile container like one of these. And I'll take a sample out. We're using sterile implements that are flame sterilised and all the rest of it. The professor saw me do all that. But if I leave it in the jar at room temperature, then I just need to leave it for a couple of days and it'll incubate and the spores will begin to produce hyphae structures. That's a fairly typical thing I've been coughing up from time to time. There's a very long hyphae structure. Again, that's been typical. You can see the gas bubbles. It's full of gas bubbles. It's a clear indication that I've got a serious systemic, deadly, neurotoxic overload of yeast in my human body. Untreated, unreported by every pathology lab in Melbourne, and they've even denied, they refuse. The doctor's order to report yeast, they refuse to do it. That has to change. The government has to step in Australia and change that. And they have to be investigated. Cinnamon, an extremely powerful antifungal and anti-yeast, and so is oregano. Palmarosa is good, rosewood even. So I've done a lot of testing there, and I use a lot of these oils, and I have been doing them for 7 years in order to attack the infection. But you've got to be careful with oils, and you really need someone to guide you because they can burn and damage the lung. Again, you've got this structure, and you've got all the elements coming out of the structure as it matures and breaks apart that are clearly fungal, not bacterial. Even I know that. So these sort of chlamydia spore type structures, there's just a straight out mass of the weird looking yeast growth. Now that is a wet mount straight out of the lung. That's probably a blow-in, that mucor plumbeus probably, plumbeus. But they have structures which also possibly appear in the lungs. So this is a different way it reproduces. So it could be something like a mucor that is reproducing as well in this way, not in having a spore head. So yeah. See there on the left there's a sample that I cough up, and there's an agar sample from the mucor. They're pretty similar. So it could be that they're in there reproducing as well. One GP who was treating patients who were being left to die by specialists with fungi problems, he did a blood test, and he seemed to think that my whole blood makeup and type and DNA structures is not very good at fighting fungi. He could be right. I used brain heart infusion. I did every technique I could to get more evidence and understand the illness more, but I'm a gardener. We do that. Now I showed this photo to the top fungal specialist in Melbourne of what I'm coughing up, and that fungal specialist said to me, there's no infection in that, that's just inflammation. And that specialist refused to investigate my illness, threw all the reports that I gave that specialist in the bin, and that was the director who blocked Stephen Mewey from treating me. And that's what I grew on the right from that mass coughing up, which that person said there's no infection in that. And that's what I grew from that. They're the people I'm dealing with. The fact that I'm laughing and not swearing about them is quite miraculous. That in itself is a miracle. But I have a deep spiritual sort of view of life. So I forgive them, and I'm even protecting their names. I don't know why. If someone's incompetent and negligent, you should let everyone know, shouldn't you? So there we go. As I say, there's just more and more. That's November 8, 21. Different dates, same thing. Different dates. Here you can see, unfortunately, the microspore budding at a really small level. That's the problem I've got, is this is really tiny. It can reproduce at a very micro level, and here I am fighting it by myself in a freezer in Melbourne, Australia. It is ridiculous. There's another outburst on the arm. That's in February 22, and look what's there. Systemic infection. That's on the skin, another outburst, and there is another mass of the infection. Here you can see faintly on the right and a little on the left the outlines of the actual sort of yeast growing out from the mass. That large mass is the infection, and you can see on the side faintly the outgrowths from that infection that still haven't sort of grown into a more solid form. And again, you can see them there if you look closely, coming out in faint silhouettes. That's where staining would bring those out, but I don't need to stain them, it'll just confuse the issue. This is all wet mounts, so they're all uniform, and it's easy to see they are consistent. This grew from pink colony, unfortunately. These do have these very, very thick, I forgot the name of these, there is a name for them, but never mind. But they're producing these thick walled cells like Huell cells, and that's coming up out of the lung. That's on agar to broth, and that's from the sputum, agar. So we're back into just February 22, massive infection. These large masses, then they bud out the side. They don't know what they're looking at here in Melbourne. They've got no idea, so they don't report it. That's the problem. Here you can see a really, this is a bit like a glomus sporocarp. It's very similar. That's why the wood fungi, they picked up, the independent lab that they throw in the rubbish bin, their report, they picked up that there's a rare wood fungi in the system of the body. And that really does, that's one of the indicators that it could be a glomus. And here we see again these glomus type bodies with inside them their own sort of internal other bodies that break apart and infect the body more and grow more in my body. Again, the sputum, you can clearly see there's a very serious problem going on, and deadly, I assure you. So these are really quite interesting images. They're deadly images. You can see here how the cluster is breaking apart there as they expand. Again, the people here in Melbourne, they look at this, they've got no idea what they're looking at, so they don't report it. Now, again, this was just left in the sterile jar for 4 days, and you can immediately see the hyphae growth and certainly the segmented, which can form the arthroconidia chains of geotrichum if it's not something else. So you can see here just masses. You can pause the video on any one you want to examine it. And I'm happy to send you a USB of all these images, absolutely, free of charge. They're unfortunately also appearing. That's like a gigantium type of fungal element. Again, unreported. That's a wet mount, and that's hyphae straight out of the lung. Again, you've got these solid ridged elements that I'm coughing up straight out of the lung. Straight out of the lung, clearly a hyphae growth. A mass of cells, yeast infection from the lung. 2022 lung, 2022, 2022, very long hyphae. That took, I think, 2 images to get the full length of that. More infection. More infection, you can see how it reproduces from tiny microspores and quickly grows into larger to reproduce again. 2022. Again, hyphae, and you can see what's found in the skin biopsies as well, the round circular elements of the yeast probably. But that's straight out of the lung. This unfortunately is a really unfortunate one, which I've seen in stool samples and in the lung. Now, I have seen somewhere wood with this type of fungi growing on it. I've seen that in my travels over my lifetime somewhere on wood, and I can't remember, I can't find anything like it on the internet. This is coughed straight out of the lung. Now this will be a very flat, thick growing mass. Again, you can see these circular lines, so it all seems to be linked into possibly the one type of fungi, perhaps in different stages of growth. But you can see the circular bridges there that are seen in smaller elements. Hyphae straight from the lung, segmented. 2022, August 27. Now this is the one that I've seen this somewhere in my lifetime, growing on dead wood. If that's lining the bronchioles, it's no wonder I'm having trouble releasing that from the bronchioles. That's why I need to chill the body on from the outside and inside, and attack that with cold air and also essential oils in brandy. I use a brandy spray, by the way, a small 30ml bottle of a spray bottle. In fact, I have it, no, it's not with me right here, but it's a small spray bottle. Brandy, 44%, no sugar, so it's brandy water. And then I put in essential oils. I won't mention them here because you've got to have a naturopath guide you on that. And even then they may be a bit hesitant, but I had to do it because of the fact that this is deadly. And the essential oils, there are many different ones that don't burn the lung but do break apart fungi, biofilms, and kill the fungi themselves. So I spray the bottle inhaling deeply while I'm in the freezer. I'll do that about probably 12 inhalations at least over 45 minutes. So if this is lining the bronchioles well, along with those mud ropes, then no wonder I'm having trouble clearing it. Now there's the colony there. It's a very unusual structure, but I know I've seen it on dead wood somewhere, maybe a long time ago. But that's in the stool and in the lung. Now that was grown on agar, whereas I've also coughed that straight up out of the lung. So there's another long hyphae. Perhaps the specialists think I've inhaled spaghetti. You gotta have a bit of humour, don't you, when you're in this degree of trouble. Now there's one of the encapsulated elements. Don't know what it is. Thick. It's like a Huell cell, like a cryptococcus. I kept pigeons when I was young, so I don't know. Could be any number of things. That's typical of the sort of work I've had to do in culturing. I've had two different temperature culturing places running, and I found out that fluvastatin is a very strong antifungal. So we did a blood test to see that I could take it with cholesterol levels or whatever, so my GP wouldn't get threatened again. And we tried the statins, and fluvastatin, you can see there, is very powerful as an antifungal. It was the best statin that I tested, but unfortunately it also didn't clear the fungus, but it did have some impact. So this is the sort of research I've done, and I'm a gardener. I won't say much more. You can see there how the microspores are just coming out of that by the hundreds, growing quickly and reproducing inside my body. Clusters of various infections. Still, we're not certain exactly what it is or what they are. That's left in a jar for 4 days, specimen jar, and it just powers away at room temperature. This, unfortunately, is this very solid mass that I'm coughing up, which could be the grittiness that sometimes happens when I'm in the freezer long enough, and I can loosen up a little bit. It almost feels like a gritty sort of sputum that I'm coughing up. It could be that this is part of the problem. These may be fungal structures from a wood fungi, which are far more solid. That can be a pretty typical sputum sample sometimes, back in 22. But I've taken so many medicines that are natural, hopefully some of these things have been dissipated. That is a yeast mass, and you can see a hyphae at the bottom there growing away and reproducing there with tiny cells from the mass. And the problem we've got is that they're just not worldly enough here in Melbourne. They need to go and live in India for a few years, or China, America, maybe even Europe, and learn a lot more about the various other types of human pathology, fungi, and in particular that humans can die from a systemic yeast infection. They don't seem to know that in Melbourne. That's a bit strange, isn't it? There's a mass, that's September 22, in the lung, an ocean of yeast. Look at that one. An ocean of, that's not commensal. I haven't had a little bit of, I don't know, some yeasty whatever. That is an ocean of deadly infection in my lung, poisoning my brain, my mind, my personality. I mean, the things these do to your mind and your personality and your brain and your emotions, it's massive. These can drive you to commit suicide. And I'm certain that 50 to 70% of people who commit suicide have an infection. They are neurotoxic to the brain. They drive you into depression. You've got no hope of stopping it. My spiritual beliefs of a universal sort of loving world that's spiritual beyond this one, they sustain me. I've got two spiritual teachers. I was born into the spiritual teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, but I left the Jewish Christian Catholic Church because they were teaching the Jewish Yahweh, two-headed God, was the same divine source of love that Jesus was at one with. So I left the Catholic Church, and then I learned Buddha's teachings. Again, Buddha and Jesus had what's called the clear light mind experience. Both of them taught the same thing. The trouble's not in the external world so much, although there is trouble and danger and injury and pain and suffering, but the main problem is the internal world of your mind. It's polluted with hatred and anger and killing. you've got to remove those negativities or those ignorances or those evil things, the warmongers, to reveal your true nature as a spiritual child of love. I believe in that. And that's what sustained me, as much as anything, as much as the cryotherapy. There's a pretty typical example of sputum on a plate, 2022, just loaded with yeast. Loaded and loaded. I should start a yeast factory. Agar, another agar, 22, agar, and that's just a reminder of these things that I'm coughing up. And you can see the right hand side there on the bottom. You can see how the starch cells are breaking apart the borders, and then you look at the things I'm coughing up, and they are exactly the same. And that is Rhodotorula, a yeast. There's the structure close up, and labs refuse to report these things. They don't even know what they are, much like. I cough up a lot of these with a very pointed end at one end of the sort of fungal structure, and then at the other end it's normally just cut off and open. But this one I've captured, there is some growth there. It's almost like a mucor growth, and that what's cut off at the bottom there could be the mucor head. It almost looks like that, but I've got a lot of these in images, I can put them on, of this very thin point, which could be connected to the hypha, and then the growth coming up to what is possibly the spore reproducing head of the fungi. That's an unusual almost mixture between a mud rope and one of these strange trumpet-like elements I'm coughing up. Sputum loaded with hypha in September 22. Now these could be oxalates, loose end crystals, but I've also come across these. I didn't save the photo, but there is a wood fungi. It affects cinnamon trees and other trees. We actually have a fungi in Australia called cinnamoni, which kills gum trees and things. But these images of what I'm coughing up, they looked very similar to this particular fungi, but I didn't record it. I didn't save the image, and I can't find it again. But I remember it killed cinnamon trees, and I've used cinnamon bark in a still. I distill cinnamon bark as well. I had to use my own distilling to try aerosols, but it could be an oxalate, loose sand. But they've been coughing up a lot as well recently. That was in, when was that? 22. So they've been coughing up for the last 2 years, but I've stopped coughing up samples, so pretty much. I'm in too much pain now to do any more research. As if this isn't enough. Now there's some other oxalates. Now the thing about oxalates, as any good mycologist could tell you, they are heavily associated with fungal growth. Fungi growth, oxalates increase. There they are in the sputum. Lots of those images of oxalates. And here's part of the fungal infection. You can see the matrix, the webbing and structure, which is breaking apart, breaking down. It's either just maturing and breaking apart, it's reproduced, or possibly the things I've been using, and that includes 3% hydrogen peroxide inhalations. I've tried so many things. Hydrogen gas will do it sometimes, but then it gets used to it. Many things have attacked it and broken it apart, and I'll get poison spikes from those various different elements. Even horseradish, raw horseradish roots chopped up, the volatile oils breathing them in can attack the structure. But horseradish is dangerous. I don't recommend anyone do it because it's incredibly volatile oil, but I had to research it, and I do eat horseradish, and I will breathe in the fumes of the horseradish, but at a very moderate level, and it will attack the bronchial biofilm infection, and it will help break it apart. Horseradish. Again, that's just in a specimen jar. Again, you can see these chlamydospores, let's say, once they mature, breaking apart, infecting the body more and more and more and more. Now that sputum just simply left in a specimen jar at room temperature for 5 days. So you get these tight, compact samples. They don't know what they're looking at. Then you get the mature ones breaking apart, like these ones, and they still don't know what they're looking at. And when they see the individual yeast cells, they still don't know what they're looking at. And if they even twig that it's a yeast, they don't have to report it, so they will not report it. So I die of a massive yeast infection, and it's never reported. because no one ever dies of that in Australia. Around the rest of the world they do, but not here. I wonder why. That's never reported. Again, we've got these unusual samples of these encapsulations, which it took me a while to see them. They were quite faint. They don't stain, but I have seen them now, and I do when I know what to look for. I don't know what they are. There you can see the outline, the faint outline of this encapsulated fungi spore, and you can see the neck there where they're beginning to produce the spores. I've got some brilliant videos of spores popping out of these chlamydia structures, chlamydia spore structures. That's the viscous film in the lungs trying to get in the road of me talking to you as it continues to grow. I must get in the freezer soon for my first 45-minute treatment, but it's important I get this done to try to help save a life in the world. You can see there that what I call the tortoise shells have broken down possibly the wood fungi, and you can see the structure there, what's left of it, and the rest is just disintegrating and of course reproducing. Again, you can see the structure there of one that has been breaking down. Now I'm coughing that straight out of the lung. Different years, different months. This has got nothing to do with commensal or I've eaten something. There's a close-up of the structure and all the fungal elements that come forth from it to kill the body, the human body. These, unfortunately, are there. These could all be similar things at different stages or different fungi, all now, unfortunately, overtaking the body. That's sputum left in a jar for 7 days. Again, I call these mud ropes, but I can't be certain what they are. That's typical of these concentric circular, sort of like starch bodies. Here's a mass that I've coughed up in September 11th, 22, and it is just a mass. This is a real serious mass of these very thick elements, very wood fungi-like elements. Very rare for me to be able to loosen that much up, very rare. You can see the ridges of the structure, and I wonder it's so hard for me to get rid of, hard to break up. You can see the circular lines there within the structures, and you can see the individual elements within the actual chlamydospore itself. I'm calling them chlamydospore because my knowledge is limited, although quite clearly it seems to be greater than all the specialists in Melbourne. So again, these structures are coming up, and I wonder, it feels a bit gritty at times when I do manage to cough it up. These are like a large sporangium or chlamydospore. This is interesting because this reminds me of when you grow tree ferns. They have what's called a foot or a pad, and then the small first growth of the fern grows, which is quite unique, and then the fern fronds grow from that. It almost looks like a fern spore that's germinating. Perhaps I'm the first person to have a fern spore infection. But you can see how they seem to grow from that central point there. That's even more telling. You can see how they seem to have an apex, and then the bodies grow out from that apex. That's coming up out of the lung. Now you can see it very clearly there. That's the mature, let's say chlamydospore capsule, whatever you want to call it, turtle shell, and you can see the individual elements that are matured inside, and they all release more spores, and you can see it's surrounded by small fungal either yeast cells. So whether there's a symbiotic relationship going on between wood and yeast fungi or some other fungi, Rhodotordia and another yeast and Geotrichum, that they all seem to be helping each other to kill the body anyway. Again, you can see the matrix there, a very interwoven matrix, very tough to break apart, but the cryotherapy in the freezer is attacking whatever's in the lung. It is attacking it, and it does break it down, and I've got to increase it because that's, I guess, my main goal, and also sharing this with the world. Maybe that's what this is all about, is that I'm able to share this knowledge. 7 years of knowledge, $200,000 of my money gone, and I've ended up using cryotherapy and natural antifungals, and the fact that I've been rejected and abandoned and left to die in agony by the medical profession in Melbourne, maybe the benefit of that, the goodness that comes, the silver lining, out of that darkness, that persecution, people being threatened, people blocked from helping me, out of that comes this incredible natural therapy. I'm happy to think that way because, one, I concentrate on the positive. But if a medical professional in the world doesn't take this on, I'm just the patient. I'm not allowed to treat anyone like this, but you can, and you've got the evidence in me, and I give it to you gladly and freely. So you can see this matrix is really interwoven and very gritty indeed. So it could be a wood fungi. Very unusual for me to cough that much up. I've never coughed such a big segment up. Small segments, broken segments, but this is the big segment that came up. That was in 2022. So back into just the common other one that's there, this common yeast. Whether they're all connected, I don't know. You can see how the mass just reproduces. There's one bursting apart of what I call these tortoise shells, but it looks like a wood fungi. Yeah, the structures are very sort of clear. The interesting thing about these tend to do look a bit like the mass of yeast earlier on in the images, the round circular masses of yeast treated with KOH that go ballistic, and they form what appears to be similar messy structures like this, conglomerates, but then they also produce hyphae in the circular images of the yeast. But this messy structure, whatever it is very similar to those circular yeasts. So whether it's a yeast that's now altered so much because I've attacked it for 7 years with so many different things that goes through a morphology of change, and it could even be a symbiotic setup now. It's adopted other aspects of another fungi, I don't know. But it's certainly unusual, it's deadly. Which one is it? I don't know. But they're deadly. But a decent pathologist in the world, a decent mycologist in the world, this makes sense to you. It makes sense to me, and I'm a gardener, so it should make more sense to you. Again, the structure, you can see that this incredible flat matrix. Now, if that's lining the bronchioles, imagine how hard it is for me to get that off. That's the problem I'm facing. That's why I nearly die every single day now. I treat myself through to 3 a.m. in the morning. Then once I go to bed, the body warms up, of course, straight away. And I have an air conditioner now in the bedroom. I had to put it in last summer because I nearly died last summer in the heat. I couldn't cool down the body enough. I took ice baths the summer before to stop dying in summer, and I've kept fighting and treating myself every day. And I'm here now to share this. And that's a great blessing for me. This research can save lives. But I need someone on my side. In Australia, of course, would be very helpful. So I could, see you and we could get into the lab together or something. But, oh no, you're a patient, you're not allowed in the lab. All that sort of rubbish goes on, all that hierarchical, ivory tower stuff. Again, these mud ropes, that's sputum 2023. Another year, same thing, growing still in the lungs. December 23, same thing, growing in the lungs. September 22, in the lungs. Urine, September 22, in the lungs. I mean, in the urine. So, my brain's poisoned. Again, sputum, that's been in the lungs, and I've coughed it straight out of the lungs. So you can imagine what's happening to the bronchioles with that in the lungs. What is it? I'll never find out in Melbourne. That's blood samples which I was given from the vein by people who tried to save my life who were not specialists, and of course clearly it's in the blood. There was one test done, the PCR test picked up leptosphaeria in the blood, the first blood test I had done by the independent people, and they throw that in the bin, of course, or the specialists, and they said you've absolutely got a fungal infection in your bloodstream. It appears to be leptosphaeria, I think it was maculans, which I've been around. I've pulled out plants that have died from that disease. I have been exposed to that fungi. So they identified it as that, but they said it may not be correct, 100% correct in the species, or even the genus possibly, could be even wrong, but they said it's 100% guaranteed you've got a fungal, some sort of mycology in your bloodstream. The specialists threw that report in the rubbish bin because they're not part of the club, they're not licensed, but they do brilliant work. Again, you can see the microspores budding there, which is of course a serious concern. And that's blood. I did a bit of meth blue staining. I tried staining at different times, but I kept the images uniform because that way they make more sense. And really this is the job of a highly skilled pathologist in fungal and mycology work in Australia. But as I told you, the head mycologist at one of our leading hospitals in Melbourne had no idea he was even looking at yeast. I won't mention their names. I will protect them. Blimey. I must be crazy. No, I'm spiritual. Oh, blimey. Now here we go. Now here's a mycorrhizal paraglomus. Now very interestingly, you can see the spirocarp type element on the left. That was in blood, and I can't remember if they're in sputum as well, I think. Then you look on the right. Now mycorrhizal, I've handled these hands have handled that much wet soil, planting plants and wet soil, soil composts, potting mixes. Mycorrhizal, I've been just totally in massive contact, more than the average person. And then of course when I had my gardening business and I had a nursery, etc., I'd be stopping for lunch and eating, and I wouldn't necessarily wash my hands very well, fully. So it's quite possible something like this got into the system, into the gut, made it through, maybe made it out of the gut, a leaky gut or something, got into the bloodstream, found a nice cozy home in the lungs and started reproducing. It's quite possible. When we look at this mycorrhizal paraglomus on the top right, that structure is the closest I can find on all the internet that is similar to what I'm coughing up regularly. Okay, it's a rare illness. Okay, so what? It's interesting. It's deadly. If I was a medical professional at university or at a hospital and I had a reputation of being a fantastic specialist, I would be really interested in something different, not just another boring fumigatus, aspergillus or another rhizopus. I have seen that before. I'd be almost excited to have a patient dying of something new, to try to save them and learn something. But I am just a footstool for them to step on and climb higher into their ivory tower. I had no idea this corruption had infiltrated the mindset of this profession of doctors in Melbourne, but it is soaked in it. It is saturated in it. I'm very, very disappointed, and I'm disgusted at the way I've been treated. But back to the topic. That's another video. And brain heart broth, that's blood, and that's what's grown. So we can see there that this is blood, brain heart broth, and there's, where did we go to? Oh, there we are. So that's a 1 there, that's in blood, September 26, and there's another one. So there's not just one. In the brain heart broth, meth blue at 1000 magnification, again we can see these circular elements and ringed by a shell type structure, chlamydospora type. Again, that's in brain heart broth, and you can see the massive reproduction of this particular fungal element. It's in the blood. As the independent PCR DNA people told me at NIM, you've got it in your blood, whatever it is, it's in your blood. As my GP said to me, you need a spinal tap 5 years ago, because he said you got all the symptoms that's in the spinal fluid, so therefore it's gotten in the blood, etc. And not one specialist will do a spinal tap. He would do it tomorrow, but he's not allowed to. He's a general practitioner. They're special people, and they refuse to do it. Even though all the symptoms point to it hitting the brain to the point of death, they won't even check the spinal fluid to see if it's gotten in there. And so on we go now, back to topic. To save other people around the world, that's what this really is about. So that's just in blood. Oh, that's just the blood, yeah, okay. I simply incubated the blood in the collection tube, sterile collection tube, properly collected from the vein by a nurse, all sterilised, etc., etc. I just left it in the tube for 13 days, and then with a sterile needle and all the rest of it, I put it on a sterile brand new slide, etc., etc., and look what I find. That's in the blood. Even, we had a Melbourne pathology to culture for yeast in the blood, nothing there. That's why I recommend all people in Melbourne demand that any pathology reports done from any part of your body for fungi or yeast, send them to Westmead Hospital in Sydney. St Vincent's branch of St Vincent's in Melbourne sent one of the 3 bronchoscopies and had it identified by Westmead Hospital in Sydney, and they identified the fungi there. So they seem to have a better knowledge of fungi. As I said, Melbourne Pathology found nothing in my blood. Oh, really? Again, this is 2021, a large mass of these, and there we can see them. This is a worry, of course. It could be a mycorrhizal, very rare, deadly fungal type of infection. I have sympathy that these rare illnesses or diseases, the average specialist doesn't come across them. Certainly not in Australia. 25 million people, that's nothing. China, you know, 1 billion. India, 1 billion. 25 million is like chicken food. So, and the number of cases are small, and the number of rare cases are even tinier. But they happen. Why not research them? Why not learn something? Here you can see the individual elements clearly within the entire structure maturing. That's seen in the skin. That's sputum. That is sputum. That's really, it's like a wood fungi or something to me. It's really unusual. The lipids, yeah, masses of lipid products of infection. Lipids can be produced by fungi, as mycologists could tell you, or pathologists should be able to tell you. You can see here this very circular structure, the circular structures within the entire large structure, the matrix, the way they build it. And it's very relevant because I have these images to start with of them being there in the lung, and you can see here unfortunately the mass of spores. That's just a mass of spores that they're maturing, they're breaking apart, and they're going to release those spores into my body, which will reproduce, and on we go to until the death experience occurs, where the brain is poisoned in total agony, and I have to pass through that horrific tunnel of torture and agony, which many people do. I'm no exception in that case, but it is horrific. The pain I've been in is just horrific. It's meningitis type pain, inflammation of the brain through being poisoned, and it's a continual drip feed of poison escalating. I try to knock it down a bit, it goes up again, I knock it down a bit to survive one more day, but I'm very restricted. I have to stay home. I rarely go out anymore, only to the shops and back. That's all I can, as far as I can drive safely. So, but I carry on, I'll fight on. So again, we're seeing here just masses of the infection type, whatever it may be. You can see the elements coming out of this slightly mature one, just breaking out of the side. Now here we have, this is January 2021, KOH 10%. If you look closely at these seem to be smaller growths of the larger ones. If you look closely, you can see here, magnified, the circular pattern matches the larger elements, what I call the tortoise shells. So the very small elements they release do seem to grow into the larger elements again, which then break apart and the cycle continues. So whatever it is, it was a beautiful photo, because that shows a clear medium stage growth, and it's got the perfect photo of the structure that you also see in the adult, but it's coming from just a circular spore. It's a really good photo though. That's a really good photo of you killing me. How are you going in there? So, and here you can see it. Here's a large mature element on the right. Here's the mid-growth stage, but if you look closely here, you can see the same circular patterns, the same bridging. Those grow from these, and these grow from the smaller spores. What is it? I'm a gardener. Is there anyone in the world interested in this? In the entire world? I'm happy to share everything with you. It'll make a brilliant case study for the Lancet or any medical magazine you want to name. Put your name onto it. Own this. I'll give it to you. I'll be co-author though. I want some credit. And I'll just finish up. There's two of the people, the wonderful people who came to my home. I didn't have to pay them 1 cent. They did that voluntarily to try to save my life. They're not specialists, that's why. That's the letter from my wonderful GP of 40 years. He's been threatened, frightened. He wouldn't tell me who threatened him, he was that frightened. I had to get him to give me that letter. And it ends with, I have no hesitation in stating that any symptoms he may describe can be relied on as being accurate and true. Signed, and Dr. Andrew Munn. Do they contact him about that? No. Do they throw it in the rubbish bin? Totally. Why? Because he's just a piece of dirt to them. They're specialists. They don't need him. A man who's known me for 40 years, my family, through to my father, my mother, my sister, my brother, me. He knew I cared for my mother for 18 years, full-time carer, nurse. He knew I cared for my crippled sister Joan. He knows who I am. He knows I had a horticultural career. He knows I know how to use a microscope. He agrees my microscopy work is way superior to anything happening here in Melbourne. He was threatened. I'll leave it on that note, because that's how this has ended up. Me fighting for my life in Melbourne, Australia, and that is just a small selection of about 10,000 to 15,000 images over 7 years. That's just a selection. I've tried to include as many different elements as I can that were common. The freezer's going, I'm going to get in there now. I'll load this onto YouTube. I'll add on a couple of others there as well that I've already put on YouTube, that they sink, they disappear. I'm going to have to try to directly contact pathologists around the world, mycology centres around the world, and try to find some human soul, some genuine, compassionate, intelligent, interested person who takes this on. I've provided enough evidence. It's a legitimate case. It's real. It's happening. I'm the one who's dying from it. That's all the evidence you really need. However, I understand everyone needs reports, etc., etc. Well, there they all are. So the way I've been so disgracefully treated in Melbourne has led me to give you this example of a human being on the earth who's had to go to enormous lengths to keep alive with natural things from a deadly neurotoxic fungal infection, refused treatment of intravenous treatment, oral antifungals failed, and I'm now using cryotherapy, and it's stopped me from dying every single day for 10 months. And I had to take care of my home. Here the family home was falling apart a bit, so I wanted to make sure everything was in good order. Holes in the ceiling, rain coming in, tiles off walls. So I battled on, and I've repaired the house, and it's all in very good order, the garden, and removed rubbish and things. So it's ready to be sold if I have to die now. And it's a wonderful tribute to my mother and father, who of course passed on some years ago, and they always kept the house in very good order. My will's written out, the funeral's paid for. I've even got the coffin on the back porch. I got it from Costco here in Melbourne. I got the cheapest coffin I could find. The money from the sale of the house, if I pass away, that will go to care for the homeless here in Melbourne. So that's the story. That's the rounded story of my life, you might say, and who I am. But there's no doubt this can be beaten, because it's a parasitic infection that's come from the outside world, that's come inside my horse's body, or my stallion, or my my physical earthly body, biological earth body. My spiritual mind and spiritual body is reeling from the messages that I'm receiving of the massive agony from the poison, and it appears at the moment that I may pass away from this body in this world very soon. And it was very important to me that I got everything ready, and now I'm just providing this very important information that the cryotherapy treatment, which was proven by my friend the fruiterers, that it works, and that I got a unit here at home and it works, and I'm now doing 4 45-minute sessions a day. And now this video, this will be the last one I think I'll make about this, and I'll put it on YouTube. But contact me again, I'll just hold that up again in case you miss it on the other parts of the video, but it's jcnfolks@gmail.com. And I will send you anything you wish, USBs with all the images. I've got literally thousands of images. I'd have to send you a massive hard drive with it all on, but I can send you all the various main images you want, all the reports. I can send you copies of all the reports, so you've got them, although they're obviously on the internet there, on the YouTube, but I can send you copies. I'm happy to send you copies. And this would make a fantastic case study for anyone in the world interested in people dying of fungal infections to start with. It would make a fantastic study of how a patient can fall through the gaps, so to speak, and the reasons why it happens, in Australia at least. Not reporting yeast, not obeying doctors' orders, specialists throwing reports in the rubbish bin from companies or pathology labs that are not licensed, specialists themselves not contacting the GP who's known you for 40 years, GPs frightened to say anything because they might get sued, even though they know you're dying, by the specialist who's incompetent. It is a really wonderful case study for how things have to change for the better. I don't want to sue anyone. I just want things to improve, and the medical profession in Melbourne is unfortunately a very sick profession. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. The culture is a sick culture, and they all know about it. Those who are in the know and who get attacked, they won't speak up, they're too frightened. But those who are the ladder climbers, the power people, they want it to stay that way. And that's what we have to smash apart. These ladder climbing, ivory tower, ego, self-centered people who should be loving, caring, sympathetic, empathetic doctors with really intelligent skills, backed up by pathology labs that work together with the GP on board, equal in their effort to love the patient who's dying or sick or diseased, and do everything together equally, no egos, combine all the information and knowledge and find the answer. They are the real doctors. They're like gold nuggets. They're out there, hard to find. Love is the main thing out of which all good things come in this world. We know there's a lot of evil in this world, but all good things come out of a loving, what I call loving spiritual life force. It's not just chemicals in the brain. It's a commitment to care for the other. Selflessness. That's the selflessness of Buddha's teachings, the selflessness of the Jesus of Nazareth teachings, the clear light mind experience of seeing everyone being the same as you, equal, as a human child on earth. Love that child as yourself, that sort of thing. Destroy the ego, because that's where all the evil comes from. Look at Vladimir Putin, Netanyahu, Hamas, the Israeli army. Ego. Murder, kill, slaughter. So I offer this to the world, and I'm happy I'm here. I'm still here today alive. It's a miracle, but I'm in massive agony. The closest thing, the simplest thing for a doctor to understand is I've got severe meningitis. You could put it down just like that. It's not meningitis, but the symptoms are like that, and most people don't live very long with meningitis if it's not treated, and yet no one will even do a spinal tap. But it's in the lungs and the skin. The mass is critical. It's producing enough neurotoxins now to poison the brain to death, and I'm in a massive struggle to even stay on track, to move out of my body in a spiritual way, because that's all I have to do now, is focus on what my beliefs are about life after death. But my mind is being smashed and my body is in agony. Even while I'm doing this video, I've been in massive pain, and yet here I am because I'm thinking of others. This can save a life. But where are you? Where are you, the doctor, the doctors, the pathologist, the microbiologist in the world? Where are you to connect to me? Whoever you are, you're called to take this on. This is coming from another sort of source beyond me as well. This can save lives. This comes out of love. If you're a doctor empowered by caring and loving patients, it's you. You're the one who's being tapped on the shoulder to connect with me. So do so. It'll be a real novel experience to have a medical professional in the world support me. I'd probably die of heart attack shock. May we all bring love into the world in the best way we can, in our work, in our family, in our country. Abandon all the armaments industry. Don't support armies anywhere in the world. Be a pacifist, like Buddha and Jesus were. The only way we're going to stop the wars is get the soldiers to go home, drop their guns. That's just a rather more serious point. with what we're seeing going on in the world. In November 2025, with the slaughter of the innocents of Gaza, Putin, the crackpot Putin, murdering and killing, invading countries, Hamas murdering indiscriminately after they've been, slaughtered and killed and oppressed for decades by the Jews. So we've got big problems in the world, and it's only going to be resolved by love and caring for one another. Good luck. Hope to hear from you. Bye.